Hey everybody, Joe Payne here with another Political Pain. And today I've spoken with two protesters, Leah and Bryant, who were involved in the Black Lives Matter demonstration in San Luis Obispo on Monday, July 20th, 2020. And specifically, they witnessed incidents involving cars pushing into protesters. And there was also a dishonest response from law enforcement. Law enforcement depicted these events dishonestly to local media, which is all too ready to gobble up whatever law enforcement gives them and disseminate it uncritically without speaking to protesters. Specifically, television media did this. Kind of follows my moniker of news should be read and not watched. As far as news, you're tending to get editorializing and more when you are watching broadcast journalism. And we see this illustrated in how days later the local daily paper, the Slow Tribune, issued a really good report where they actually spoke to protesters and talked about what they witnessed with these cars pushing into protesters. The PD decided to focus on the back windshield of one of the cars that was broken by a thrown skateboard, but they didn't disclose the fact that this car was pushing into protesters so hard that one protester flew up onto the hood of this car.
Law enforcement says one vehicle moved forward and a protester got on top of the vehicle. Another used a skateboard to smash the back window. A family with a 4-year-old was in the car. CHP is now looking for those protesters.
The Slow PD also clearly targeted one protester named Tiana Arata and clearly had some dishonest tactics in the way they depicted her involvement with organizing the protests. And the Slow Tribune, to their credit, also issued a pretty strong editorial from their editorial board calling out the Slow PD for dishonesty. So I want to hear from Bryant and Leah about what they witnessed. They both saw the events very closely that were on the 101. And this is just to give a voice to protesters, because if I want people to understand anything, it's that law enforcement is a political institution. They get their funding through public means, like a lot of agencies, but they also have an incredible control over the discourse, and they know that they can basically play local media like a fiddle and characterize protests. And in this case, we see it quite obvious that it's dishonestly. And this goes all the way up. You know, Attorney General Bill Barr just testified in front of Congress, and President Trump, they've all tried to paint all protests, Black Lives Matter protests that have continued on after the death of George Floyd, as rioting, as violence, as radical anarchists, leftists, Antifa terrorists, and all of that. So take a look here. Brian and Leah, I clicked between the two interviews because they went quite long, the most pertinent information, but take a look at this. Just want you to hear from these local protesters and what they saw and what they went through. And if you like what I'm doing here, please like, subscribe, follow, hit the bell, all of that kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and here on YouTube for now. So thanks again for watching, everybody. Thanks for staying informed with me. So did you witness anything going on with cars specifically? Did you see any of the incidents?
Yes. So the only one I saw was the one on the freeway where the back window got broken. Mm-hmm. So when we were on the freeway, we had blocked the on-ramp from, I believe it was Santa Rosa Street. And there was a gray car that was trying to get through and kept pulling up. And we had a lot of people, blocking with their bodies to make sure that everything was, safe. And then the car decided to speed up and hit a protester. And the protester thankfully was able to lift his feet up in time. Otherwise, he might have got, stuck under the car. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other protesters responded by smashing his skateboard into the back of the car. Mm-hmm. And that caused the car to stop. And, I honestly believe that the car might have kept going and might have further injured that protester had it not been for, given a reason to stop. And then the car pulled up next to the police officer that was blocking the southbound ramp, and got out and spoke to the officer. And then the officer didn't, do anything. The guy got back in his car and then drove away.
But this is specifically kind of culminated around actions involving automobiles, people, because the
Mhm.
protesters were blocking traffic.
Yeah.
Cars were kind of what I saw the videos. I saw the videos
Mhm.
that were live streamed from the event,
Mhm.
and then I saw the drone footage that the police released through local television media.
Yeah.
That, as far as I could see, yes, the protesters were blocking these cars, but then the cars were accelerating into them.
Mhm.
And the response was to hit the cars. The one on the 101 specifically was with a
Mhm.
skateboard, broken glass, which they've talked about, fell on a 4-year-old. And
Yeah.
then, but again,
They've made a big point of that.
yeah, and this is where me as a journalist, I'm well aware of
Mhm.
the relationship that police have with local media and how
Mhm.
they know that they can basically serve whatever they want to local media, and it will be uncritically gobbled up and shared and disseminated. What did
Mhm.
you see specifically? You said you witnessed these two events with the cars, or a few different events.
Yes.
Tell me what you saw. And
Okay,
I'd
so what
appreciate
I
that.
saw, I typically was marching in front. I tend to try and keep front up, behind the black leadership, but it's there to, we're there to protect them because they're going to be the targets. As we've seen, police targeted the black leadership. They didn't arrest any white people after it, So what I saw is that there was a number of times where automobiles either hit us or attempted to hit us. The one time with the skateboard and the guy actually hitting Sam and pushing him on the hood, that was only one of possibly 4 to 6 different times where that kind of thing happened. I was almost hit myself by someone as we were blocking the freeway. This was someone who was coming, he was on the on-ramp, and I think he tried to explain that he had just got off a long shift and just didn't have time for it. Middle-aged white guy clearly didn't want to be a part of it. We let him on through. They don't seem to highlight that. They highlight about the people about the people that were stopped. They don't say about the people who were let through on it. So that was one of the occurrences I was pushed into. My actual legs were touched by his car. And then let's talk about the account with Sam, who is the person who was pushed on the hood. I've been very public about saying that the guy who was driving that car was several cars behind. So traffic on the on-ramp was stopped. We had stopped all traffic on the 101. People were going along with this. They weren't speeding into us at 65 miles an hour because they didn't see us. People had stopped. This guy was a few cars back. He clearly didn't want to be stopped, so he drove off onto the dirt off the side of the highway. So he drove out, tried to get around the line. He was a few cars back. There were people already over there. He came back onto the highway where he stopped because there's people right in front of him. I believe Sam was the first person to get in front of him. He was the first person that was there, and the car kept, I believe they're using the term brake checking into him.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So I hadn't seen that term before, but yeah, so he was accelerating then braking.
That's something you're supposed to do to other cars, not people, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So these are
pedestrians anyway.
These are humans in t-shirts, out in front of them. We're not in vehicles at all. We have no weapons. There's nothing that's threatening that we're doing. And so he kept brake checking into him, pushing him until Sam was actually physically thrown onto the hood of the car. And I had heard from people that the driver of the car was yelling slurs and yelling at us out the window. I didn't hear this. I was more focused on the actual movement of the vehicle and who was in front of it at that time. I was close enough that I could touch the window of it if I reached out.
Okay.
Yeah,
you were right there.
Yeah, because as soon as I started to see Sam getting pushed, I remember thinking I wanted to grab him and pull him off, but I thought fast enough, I knew that might pull him under, or might cause more problems.
And it's dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's dangerous for me as well. Yeah.
And someone did strike the window.
Yeah. So there was someone. So they pushed through the group. I saw some confusion on this because some people were trying to say that the windows hit multiple times by the skateboard. That's not true because the car was moving too fast. Right. Because the back window is broken because the car was driving through the group. And the person threw the skateboard at it, which I'm saying possibly saved Sam's life because it caused the car to stop before it had gotten past and gotten up to speed.
Okay.
And he was able to get off.
it was a little difficult for me that, especially people have hit on the fact that, you know, there may or may not have been no one who's there, it seems like, saw a child in the car. But everyone's placing the blame on the protesters that were trying to, you know, just peacefully block the way. No one was touching the car. Everyone was just trying to stand in front and make sure, you know, there wasn't any opportunity in case there was ill intent. But no one's focusing on the fact that this man endangered his child by speeding into a human body. Yeah. And I feel like if people really cared about the safety of the kid, it wouldn't just be blamed on the protests, you know, because there's obviously someone in that car that's being negligent with the safety of their child.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about, like, blocking a freeway as a protest tactic? Because you see, and we can get to the social media response as well, because we all know how toxic social media is, but people very often, you know, say, well, you're in the road, you're asking for it type of rhetoric. So, I mean, what do you think about that as a tactic, you know, walking into the 101? In my opinion, it makes for a great picture, right? And it gets a lot of attention to the movement. But, you know, how do you see it?
I think people who weren't there don't really understand the fact that when those things happen, the police divert everything that's not able, like everything that's able to get off of the previous exit, it gets diverted. So really on either side, there's probably about 20 cars that are being blocked. We weren't blocking any emergency services. You know, people were even getting out of their cars and like talking to us. You know, if people were actually in an emergency, like, I have no doubt that, you know, I mean, we're not going to let someone die in their car, you know, if someone's, you know, giving birth or whatever, we're not, you know, we're going to let them through. We're not trying to kill people, but the point is to disrupt. The point is that, you know, you have to make yourself seen. This obviously gets seen. It doesn't go unnoticed. It's disruptive. It pulls attention, and it also pulls a lot of resources from the city. The more time and money and officers that are working on, you know, a big protest on the freeway, the less people and the less money they have to focus on other things. It's about diverting resources.
A lot on that, and I've been thinking about it a lot. What I'd like to clarify for people is they keep pushing this angle that, oh, it's just a dangerous thing to do. When I was out there, I didn't feel in danger from cars traveling highway speeds hitting me. I felt in danger from the people who stopped, who saw who we were, and then tried to run into us.
Okay.
Most overwhelmingly, people were cooperative. We had people who got out of their cars to take pictures of us, to, you know, hold up power fists and peace signs. We had people who later reported saying that their, you know, moms and people were stuck in it and they were completely fine with it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the people who tend to be complaining about their time being wasted or not being stuck in traffic. They weren't there. You'll see that regularly from people's reports online. They weren't even in their cars. We only stopped probably, I forget what number I'd said before, but maybe 20, 30 cars. Mm-hmm. Everyone else was diverted by police further down the highway in either direction.
Yeah.
And we were only out there from the police estimate of 40 to 60 minutes. So to reiterate, I didn't feel in danger from most of the people out there. It doesn't feel like inherently dangerous act. I felt more in danger from the people who tried to hit us and from the police lining up with zip ties. Yeah. You know, I find that to be much more of a threat. You know, they didn't show a bunch of that footage, how intimidating that is. Mm-hmm. But I've been seeing people say that this was an action that is historical. Civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. did this, you know, a lot. You know, this is something that people do. I've seen people do it in Portland, and was effective. And I think
it's also dangerous. Let's be real. Seattle, that woman died. You know, I mean,
yeah. But this is also people. There's also people who, on the right, who will use their cars regardless of if you're on the road or not. Look at Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Like Charlottesville, there's people who would drive into people who were in alleyways. They were not on a highway.
We've had multiple since the George Floyd protest began, multiple car attacks on
Yeah.
protests, on protesters, Bakersfield, elsewhere. So yeah, it's
Yeah, from the police too.
yes.
Yeah.
No, I heard in the flesh a Santa Barbara
Mhm.
County Sheriff's deputy joking about it. So
Oh,
it,
right.
it is definitely a meme,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
of
meme. That's what it is. I was using that term earlier. People saying that they would hit protesters has become a meme. Subsequent days, I started thinking more about the action and seeing people say, oh, it's, dangerous, this. I started thinking about it more. I was like, well, the point was to get attention for the movement. And I
Mhm.
realized that's what it did. It's been incredibly successful. It's been incredibly successful here because it's brought everyone into these conversations with the people on their friends list. All the people on social media have been talking about this. They started to see how which of their friends just takes cops' words for it, who thinks that people shouldn't have the right to protest, who thinks people should be killed. It's a real clear thing when you see one of your friends say, oh, that person deserves to die. They deserve to be run over in the street for being out there.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful when you start to see that in your own community. What we get constantly here, especially in San Luis Obispo, but in the Central Coast in general. I was listening several times to Dave Congleton's radio show recently, he's kind of branded as being an independent. I don't know. I heard his viewers who were saying that we should be run over repeatedly, we should be shot.
Yeah.
These are people who are not inconvenienced in any way by the actual action. They just don't like the idea of Black Lives Matter as much as they don't want to admit that that's the reason. Instead, they'll hide behind illegality, they'll hide behind the police, etc.
I was there from the beginning. I left for about 15 minutes in the middle because when they were still walking around downtown, because I had a prior engagement and then I came back. So, but from what I experienced, it was, very peaceful. They the organizers were leading. They were trying to set a pace. They had a banner in front to make sure that nobody, sped up. They had peacekeepers in vests who were lining the crowd to make sure to act as the specific bodies in between people that were trying to antagonize, trying to stop, just like stop cars so they couldn't drive into crowds. And then the organizers themselves, and especially Tiana, kept saying us directly. She was like, don't antagonize, especially white people, don't antagonize, because that will all, be taken out on Black and brown people later. So she specifically was someone I remember trying to de-escalate any situations that came up. There weren't
Boy, she knew what was going on, didn't she?
Yeah.
Wow.
20-year-old Tiana Arado was arrested on charges of participation in a riot, unlawful assembly, conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and resisting arrest. The sheriff's office says she was released from jail just before 1 o'clock this morning on zero bail.
I wasn't at the original one that went on the 101. I know that ever since then, Chief Chantrell has been in some sort of weird direct contact with Tiana. They text each other, or she texts her. I don't think Tiana really responds much, but
yeah.
And
I have the obligatory cat getting in the Zoom call thing.
Yeah, I think we might hear my dog in a bit. She had a bath earlier and doesn't like it. So
okay. So the PD, the chief was in a texting situation with Did Tiana create is she the main organizer? What do you know about
so
that?
I want to clarify that too. I think that's a really weird thing that the police have done by calling her the leader. They built her up as being the leader when it's a grassroots movement. We don't have a leader. We have leadership. We have people who talk regularly at the protests, typically BIPOC people, so we have a lot of Black people who speak. We also have some really strong Indigenous people who have been incredible. We also have Latina people who will speak at them. And calling her the leader is, I think, really unfair, and was an attempt by the police to say, oh, she's the leader and we got her, so problem solved, when that's not really what the case is.
Okay.
Black Lives Matter in general doesn't have leadership, so I think that them trying to frame it as that way is more to serve their own goals than anything that's accurate.
And they're also trying to put a lot of charges against her of inciting a riot.
Yeah.
police say the organizer is responsible for what happened during the protest.
We do have several videos where she's encouraging individuals to block vehicles, as we've seen her what we believe be and potential acts of vandalism.
I think they are absolutely trying to make an example out of her. I think because she has put herself out there, she has, you know, kind of like let herself be one of the main faces. They could have arrested any number of people that were there for any of the things they, you know, announced charges for her. Like I could have been arrested for unlawful assembly, you know, but they chose her, and there's a reason.
So, you know, when you go on the streets here, they are mostly younger. I mean, this is the thing. I don't want to talk too much about Tiana because I know that there's a lot of pressure on her right now. But like,
they're going after her.
She just turned 20 years old.
Wow.
Okay. I don't think people quite understand how young she is, and she's having this kind of attention from the police, where undercover cops have been watching her. She's had people come outside her house and yell the N-word at her. Which she said triggered her grandma's PTSD from childhood. When she was, I'll use the word ambushed, you know, by the police after the protest, because they waited for people to clear out before they just grabbed her.
Didn't they? Yeah.
You noticed in that bit of footage that it was almost entirely the black leadership that was left. It was all black people, a few white people who were part of the protest. Everyone else had left. And police were totally fine coming in then and restraining them, you know, and shoving them to the ground.
Yeah.
So she's been targeted by that. Police also had cops at her house after the protests to catch her there in case they couldn't get her at the park. You know, this is a 20-year-old person that they're doing this to.
When you are protesting the police, and, you know, it was very obvious from, again, I left when most of the crowds dispersed, but when I left, there were only a few bike cops. There were absolutely no police presence. And then you can see the amount of police in the videos that come up. And I call it an ambush, because it really was, that, you know, because it wasn't like it was obvious that something was going to happen. They very clearly waited until everyone had left in order to do this, so they would have less eyes and less resistance. And I think there is a risk, but I think ideally, and I think what people are pushing for, is the fact that there shouldn't be a risk of being arrested for something like this. This is the problem, and the arrest shouldn't have happened in the first place. Because again, no one was hurt. The only property that was damaged was property that was trying to run over people. And you know, and we have you have a right to protest. You have a right to organize protest. She was exercising that right, and actively de-escalating situations. And I think that the police response is really inadequate. You know, even at the silent protests across from the police station, we saw pictures and video from Santa Rosa Park where there were unmarked vans and police officers lined up in the park just in case something happened, but they were out of view from the rest of us.
And this is what's weird, is also the drone footage, which, you know, when people need to take a breath and understand what, like, defund the police means. It's look at all the toys and staff that police have. They were following this protest with drones.
I believe they had 2 drones on the highway, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go. They had 2 drones, and some of the footage they shared was they're like, we need someone with this car to, you know, come forward, whoever is in this car. And the footage clearly shows the car pushing into protest.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, something that I've brought up with people is I believe they posted, so I think it was CHP or SLO PD, posted some of their drone footage of the particular incident with the skateboard. and then they took it down, which is confusing to me. I don't know exactly what their reason for that was, yet they kept up that footage of Tiana with the flag, you know, whenever they're pushing on that, which you've referenced several times as being a clear example of a car hitting her.
Yeah.
But so they kept that one up. So that's what I'm talking about, is that as soon as they saw the way that they're spinning this by showing the glass, by showing the giant duct tape over the window,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they're not being fair at this at all.
Yeah, that's where to me it gets into like don't believe your lying eyes type of like area.
Precisely.
And I've done a lot of protesting growing up against the war and whatnot. And I think what's unique about Black Lives Matter and about this movement is that I hope young people and just anybody who's protesting realizes that what this subject is about, law enforcement, and that's who you interact with as a protester. You're kind of putting a target on your back in a way for them, and they're going to use what they can in whatever way they can to, you know, that's why I think at that Tea Party thing, Parkinson was saying, well, this is mostly radical anarchists, and they're kind of going with this Trump administration line. I mean, what do you think about that? What's your take or view on that?
I think, I mean, it's so hard to, how do you debate an outright lie, you know? Like, I mean, you know, having grown up here, the people I see at these protests are kids I've grown up with. They're, you know, we're not, you know, the people that are coming out are not some, like, you know, secret club or faction that, like, does secret meetings and is attempting to, like, you know, destroy life as we know. We're just, you know, we're kids who care about the safety of other people.
Wait, you mean you didn't all come on a bus from Antifa land?
I know, you know, our secret headquarters and buried in a mountain somewhere. Yeah. No, we're just kids who grew up here and you know, have listened to, you know, people talk about the injustices done to them in this county, and want to help make that right. We're not all perfect. We all don't have the same ideas about everything, but what we do agree on is that things need to change. When they call us anarchists, you know, they call violent anarchists and stuff like that. It's like, I mean, you know, I've had people try to tell me, who I've been at the protest, they try to tell me, like, just don't listen to the lies by these irresponsible protesters. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. They're all violent. And I'm like, hi, no, we aren't. You know, I think people think of the police as and government as an inherently neutral organization, because that's kind of what we've been taught. There's so much left out about how, you know, government was formed, organizations were formed, and the basis for a lot of it is, you know, based in racism. You know, especially the foundation of the police on, like, slave patrols and stuff like that. There's this narrative in SLO, especially among white people, that you know, the issues that exist other places don't exist here.
Yeah.
And I think that narrative exists because we have so few people of color in this area that you never see it. You know, but now that the people of color in our community and, you know, the organizers of this protest are becoming more visible and, you know, getting louder and getting more attention, I think it's just unearthing all the things that were already there. So I also, you know, I mean, I grew up here, you know, as a white person, you can't really escape that. You know, I also used to believe, I was like, this place is different, you know, but when Ian Parkinson said he hasn't seen any evidence of systemic racism in SLO or in this county, the systems that are already in place in this country, just, you know, by virtue of existing, by virtue of having a government in this country, you know, they're already around us. It doesn't have to be, you know, someone in, you know, like a KKK member on, you know, a council or something like that. It's by virtue of having a city government and abiding by the laws in this country, it's already built into our system.